Thank you for joining us for this Satori software webinar, Updates from MTAC February 2015. Before we get started, I would like to cover just a few quick housekeeping items. Number one, if you participate in social media, you can connect with Satori software via Twitter, on LinkedIn, and on Facebook. This webinar is being recorded. The recordings will be available shortly after broadcast, and you can find it on the webinars page of satorisoftware.com. This webinar is scheduled to last around 60 minutes. However, in the event that Kim really gets rolling and gets talking and has lots of fun things about MTAC to talk about, we might run a little long. That's been known to happen with Kim in the room before.
That's right.
And if that's the case and you need to drop off, that's fine. As I mentioned, the recording will be available on satorisoftware.com. I'm Rob Perrin. I'm the Director of Multimedia Marketing for Satori Software, and I will be your host today. Also joining me, Kim Mauch, Senior Product Manager for Satori Software. Hello, Kim.
Good morning, Rob.
How are you?
Doing good.
MTAC.
Yeah, lots of things happening over in Washington, D.C.
In a very specific place in Washington, D.C. What's this spot called?
That's called L'Enfant Plaza, and that's the center of all things postal. The USPS headquarters are stationed right there in the heart of Washington, D.C., and every quarter a group of industry representatives gather in Washington, D.C. to talk about some technical interactions with the post office to try and solve some problems, get together and work through different issues, and also get caught up on postal news. So every quarter there are MTAC updates in Washington, D.C. Outside of the quarterly updates, MTAC also has some work groups, task teams, and user groups that all work through some technical issues to help both the industry and the USPS work well together and to solve problems like undeliverable mail processing issues, and all of those things. So it's a very useful group, and we're fortunate enough to participate in it a couple different ways. So Bob Shimmick, who everyone knows and loves, he's one of the representatives for ID Alliance, and he also participates in the mail preparation and entry focus track. So he's the leader for that track at MTAC, and I also participate in the user group 5, which is the addressing group for MTAC, and so we're fortunate enough to be able to participate to help advise both the mail industry and the post office on some good ways to improve processes and to really get that whole thing going. So so there's a lot of stuff going on at MTAC every year.
Now, Bob Shimmick is a Senior Director of Postal Affairs here at Satori Software, and he does a regular Monday morning news briefing. In fact, MTAC came up last week during that briefing.
That's right. Yeah, he's very plugged into the industry, and we try and report that news as soon as it breaks.
You're both very plugged in. It's handy to have you guys around.
Yeah, it's good.
So what do you got for us today?
So we've got a lot of things to cover. There were a lot of things that happened for MTAC this year. We'll talk a little bit about the new Postmaster General and kind of how the post office is doing financially right now. There are some changes that are happening for mail entry as far as network rationalization, and there are also some changes in their IT structure and things like that, and some important news about the assessments for that have kind of been looming over the postal industry for a while. There are some updates there that we can talk about, and we'll kind of round it out with some miscellaneous topics. So we've got quite a bit to cover here.
Fantastic. Let's get started.
Yeah, so the first thing is we did get introduced to the new Postmaster General. Megan Brennan is the first female Postmaster General that the USPS has had, and this was basically her first introduction to the mail industry as Postmaster General. She's been interacting with us for many years in her previous role as Chief Operations Officer, and she was just recently promoted to Postmaster General, and so she announced her new team. So since she's now no longer the COO, Dave Williams, who has been doing the mail entry stuff for ages. He actually got promoted to Chief Operations Officer, and then succeeding him is Linda Malone, who she had kind of come up through the Northeast area, and she was promoted to the VP of Network Affairs, and so she's a good resource there, and we've been able to work with her, and she's done a lot of really interesting things like all the plant loading, the load leveling that happened last year. She was a big contributor to, so she knows a lot about how those trucks move from point A to point B. She knows all that stuff. So a couple updates that Megan was able to share with us this year. For the first time in what seems like forever, the post office has a little bit of investment capital that's available because they haven't been paying their retiree prepayment that the government has been imposing on them. They have just a little bit of extra slush money to invest this year, and Ms. Brennan actually announced that there were 3 TACs that the post office was going to use to spend that money. The first is on vehicles. So anyone who's seen those delivery vehicles that are driving down the street for all of the mail, they call them LLVs, and they've been around for ages. They were actually only designed to be working for about 15 years, and a lot of them have been on the streets for more than 22 years. So their vehicle fleet is getting pretty old. It's about ready to start retiring those, so they're going to start putting a little bit more investment into that. Another investment is going to be in package sortation. The post office is really looking at packages as a new revenue stream. That's definitely one of the main growth areas as far as volume and revenue. So they're going to be investing in some technology to handle that new load. And then also they're going to be investing in training for their employees. So it's a good to kind of hear what those focuses are for new investment for the year. And then, of course, she's going to continue with an operations background. She's very aggressive about decreasing costs, cutting all the fluff. She's very, wanting to make the whole thing very streamlined. And then she's also going to start concentrating on some new growth initiatives. So it was very optimistic. It was a very friendly way for her to kick off the MTAC meeting, and it was very playful. It was a very good session. At one point, one of the attendees there had made a comment about how periodicals used to be the anchor in the mailbox, and apparently someone at the post office had said at an event that catalogs were now the anchor in the mailbox, and so someone asked, well, who is it really? And Megan replied, well, I love all my children. So it was a good comment. She played that very well.
Not taking sides.
Yeah. Well, it's important to keep, especially at MTAC, where there are definitely each of the different associations that are represented at MTAC do have a very core focus, and so being able to balance that is really important.
Remember those 20-pound Sears catalogs that used to come out?
Yeah. They actually started bringing back the JCPenney catalog. So they're going to be sending that out again, which is nice for the post office and also for JCPenney. They actually found that companies who actually send out a physical catalog and then link it to their digital site, they actually get there's a little bit more brand loyalty and also more revenue that comes from having both the printed catalog and the online ordering. So it's a really interesting interesting trend. After all this digital all the time, they're kind of going back to mail, so it's really nice.
What is old is new again.
That's right. The old things are always the good things, right? They have the staying power. So here's a slide that I pulled from Joe Corbett's presentation. Joe Corbett is the accounting guy there at the post office. He knows all the financials, all that information, and so you'll notice here that this is representing the operating cash that they have on hand. And you'll notice that at the beginning of 2013 at the end of 2013, they were pretty low in terms of their operating cash. They had less than a week of operating cash, which for a business is scarier than just about anything you could imagine. And but the nice thing is with this trend, you'll notice that that their operating cash is trending up. So they're looking a little bit more positive on the outlook of how things are going, and even with the projections here, it's looking like the financial perspective is starting to look up a little bit. So that's nice.
I'm no economist, but I know graphs that go up are good, right?
Yeah, that's generally what we like to see. I also like that the line is green. That's always happy. So, so the next thing that we'll talk about a little bit is we'll kind of dive a little bit more into the financial landscape. Again, this positive trend here, the mail volume is actually up by 1.4%. It doesn't seem like a lot.
You should have made these numbers green.
I should have. That would have been way better.
What were you thinking?
And one of the really interesting things that was stated was that revenue was up by 4.3%. And this wasn't mentioned in the MTAC meetings, but 4.3% is the exact amount of the exigency case that was filed last year. So,
are you saying that that's related?
I am not an economist, but it seems it seems like there's a correlation there.
Or a coincidence.
Yeah.
One of those C words.
Yeah. So it's kind of an interesting correlation there that the revenue is up by exactly 4.3%, and that's exactly what the exigency rate case is. But there is some good news in shipping, and so the post office has announced that all of their shipping categories have been up on an average about 10%, and they actually saw an 18% bump in packages that were sent over the holiday season. So that's pretty significant. They had actually only budgeted for a 13% increase in packages, so the fact that there was an 18% bump, that was extra good, right? You gotta get an extra gold star for that.
They signed some very strategic partnerships when it comes to packages, so that's good news, but sort of expected.
Yeah. They definitely had some different partnerships with e-commerce companies and kind of trying to drive that volume up. They also added Sunday delivery over the holidays, and that's actually continued, and they've gotten quite a bit of volume that way by signing those special agreements there, and then you see kind of here from the numbers that definitely the number of packages increased pretty significantly, and of course with that always comes the revenue. So it was good news for the post office and good news for those e-commerce companies, because the delivery problems that everyone had in the 2013 holiday season didn't seem to materialize. Even with the weather issues that we had this year, there didn't seem to be the big delivery problems this year that we did the previous year. So let's take a look at the other things here. We've got so there is some problems still with the pre-funding requirements. So the post office is required by Congress to pre-fund some retirement benefits programs, and the post office hasn't been actually paying those payments because they've really prepaid more than what I think they probably need to, but by law they're supposed to make these payments. They haven't paid them for several years, and so there is still a need for some congressional action for the post office to really be in the black, but at least for now there's some breathing room. There was a lot less stress on Joe Corbett's shoulders when he was presenting than he has in the past. The other years he looked very, very tense. In this year he looked a little bit more relaxed, and I think that the increase in volume and the increase in revenue is definitely let him have a little bit of breathing room, so that's good. Another thing that came out of his presentation is actually the fuel rates. So everyone's really happy that the fuel rates across the country have gone down. You go to fill up your car or your truck, and you're noticing that number is significantly less than it has been in the recent past, and the post office stands to benefit from that as well. I mean, obviously transportation is a huge cost center for them, and all the different trucks that go all over the country, and they could stand to save about $300 million if those rates are really starting to flatten out. So that's hopeful for them. And there was some discussion about about how to calculate the actual value of their real estate assets. So the Office of the Inspector General came out with this report saying, oh, it should be X dollars, and the USPS kind of disagrees because of different things. So there's really not going to be a final say on what really the value of those assets really is, but it was kind of interesting to hear the banter back and forth about, okay, they should be worth X, no, they're really worth less. And so it's kind of an interesting discussion that was had there.
Ultimately, the only way to measure the value of real estate is what someone buys it for. So without selling it, it's all theoretical anyway.
And and that's actually an interesting note, because one of the things that they're doing with the network rationalization is they're actually kind of contracting the different processing centers, and so they're freeing up some space in their real estate areas. And Megan Brennan had actually said in her presentation that the intention with that is actually not to sell those locations; it's to repurpose them. So it doesn't look like a lot of sales of USPS real estate is in the future. So speaking of network rationalization, that is going to continue this year. The big pushes for network rationalization, so that's where they're contracting the processing facilities. They're closing some SEFs in the area, and that's actually going to start. The big pushes are going to be in the April timeframe, and then again in July they're going to be closing a lot of those facilities and consolidating that processing. So one thing that happened that was pretty significant at the beginning of the year is they did change the delivery standards for first-class mail. So in a lot of areas, that overnight delivery standard has been either contracted or eliminated completely. And so, but the interesting thing was with the service performance values, really the only thing that went down in service was the 3 to 5 day first class mail. So that mail that should take 3 to 5 days to deliver hasn't been up to snuff. It's not quite where they want it to be. Periodicals are also dipping just a little bit, and but everything else seems to be trending at least a little bit better than last year, if not where the post office ultimately wants it. One of the big changes that happened along with that service standard change is they changed the shift schedule for just about every USPS employee. And so a lot of the overnight tours went away, and they kind of shifted it. And according to Dave Williams, just about every single schedule for every single processing employee changed as a result of this. So they're having a lot of changes that are going on, lots of shifts going on in responsibility and location and all those different things. And he said that it was the biggest change that he had to scheduling in his entire career at the post office. So that's a pretty big change that they had there. We have heard some rumors, Satori has heard some rumors about some different processing problems in different areas, and nothing that's kind of bubbled up to a bigger trend. But if you do have any problems with delivery in your area, then you should contact your BSN or your local district mailer affairs contacts. If you do have a BSN, then you have access to a solution called eService. You'll be able to access that through the Business Customer Gateway, and you'll be able to report any problems that you have with mail delivery, and they'll be able to take that. If you don't have a BSN, then you can just go through your local district mailer affairs. So kind of going along with that, with the little bumps that are happening in the road, the week before MTAC, unfortunately, there was a pretty significant problem inside the USPS IT structure. And basically what happened is all of their systems went down. Email went down, Postal One went down, just about every digital system that required authentication went down. Oops. Yeah. So apparently their domain controller got reset in some weird way. Somebody made a pretty fatal mistake there, and it was down for about 2 days. Apparently all of USPS was running on text messages for about 2 days. But the nice thing is the contingency...
There's only one? If one domain controller?
I'm not sure how that goes. I'm not sure how their whole system is going together. But
Oops.
yeah, that was a pretty big problem. And but the nice thing is they did have the contingency plan in place. They activated it very quickly. As far as we've heard, there were very few problems. I mean, obviously you couldn't submit your electronic documentation to Postal One, but you were able to roll back to your paper and get that mail flowing and everything like that. So they're still kind of working through all the issues that had arisen due to this event, and so it's just kind of one of those where they're going to have to learn from this mistake, and hopefully it won't happen again. So that was an unfortunate thing that happened there. So another couple things that happened that were announced about the IT and digital infrastructure. One is that 85% of all the mail that's in the system right now is full service. So that's a pretty good percentage of the mail, and of course they're always wanting to get more people onto full service. So if you haven't, we encourage you to do so. Another is that e-induction is an initiative to get rid of those 8125s, get rid of the paper processes for drop shipments. And that's rolling out to all facilities. So it was only available at certain facilities, and they're slowly rolling it out to all the remaining facilities over the next couple months. And so they're really going to be starting to push for e-induction for everybody there. So let's see here. What else do we have? So the next thing to talk about is the assessments, and we've talked about that quite a bit in the studio here about the different mailing assessments, what they are, what they mean, and when they are going into effect. And so one of the big announcements that came out of MTAC this last week was that the assessments have been postponed again. And so it's kind of
like Groundhog Day.
It is, eventually they'll get it right, and eventually these things will go into place. So we do recommend that you get familiar with how to access your scorecard and figure out what your problems are and get them fixed, because eventually these assessments will go into place. They're still really serious about it. But
Kim, do you know the story about Crying Wolf?
It is starting to feel a little bit like that.
Just saying.
Yeah. So initially they had proposed that those assessments go into effect in November, and then it got pushed back to January and then into April. Now they're saying full service and seamless assessments would be maybe this summer. That's what they have published on the website right now. However, there was a little bit of uneasiness in the statements at MTAC about that date. So I'm not confident on a July date for those assessments. But again, it's good to get familiar with them, know what your scores are, and fix the problems. So when they go into place, they won't affect you at all because you won't have them. So the other thing that they did note is the move update part of the assessments would be postponed because they do need to have PRC approval. So that's the Postal Regulatory Commission needs to review the proposal for how those assessments will be calculated and applied, and so those are unlikely to happen until the next major price increase, which would be sometime in 2016. And then they did post a whole swath of new guides to RIBS, and so you can go to ribs.usps.com, and there are a list of brand new guides to e-induction, seamless acceptance, about your postage assessments, and your mailer scorecards. So all of those are available. Some are in draft form, but you can kind of get an idea as to where the post office is going with these if you view those on that site. So the next thing is, it's not directly MTAC related, but one of the things that's happening with the April price increase is that the preparation for FSS mail is going to be changing here with the April price increase. So one of the big changes is they're actually going to be consolidating all the prices for the mail that's going to be heading to FSS equipment. So before, you could take a look at your mail, and based on your old preparation, your pre-FSS preparation, you could say, okay, well, this piece would be 5-digit rate, this piece would be 3-digit rate, and you might have several different rates would be all in an FSS bundle. They're actually going to be collapsing that in the April price increase. So now they're just going to be a few prices, one for automation and non-automation FSS mail. And then depending on whether you're using an FSS scheme container or a non-scheme container. So there are going to be much fewer prices that can be in an FSS bundle. They're also going to start processing first-class mail on FSS, so that's going to be a change for first-class mailers. It'll be interesting to see how the service standards are affected by that, or maybe not. And then there's a question right now out about high density and high density plus for FSS preparation. The new FSS rates are just slightly better than what you would consider to be a 5-digit rate, but they're going to be a little bit not as good as the high density and high density plus rates. So one of the contingencies that they put in the Federal Register notice about the price increase is that you could exclude your high density and high density plus mail from FSS preparation. But there was some discussion at MTAC kind of off to the side about, well, is that really what was intended? Are we trying to divert that mail away from FSS preparation? And so there are probably going to be some more discussions, and hopefully that'll all get sorted out before the actual April price increase, because that's I think that's an unintended consequence that the post office wasn't really ready for. So the next thing to talk about is about mail preparation and entry, and so let's talk a little bit about OCI files. OCI files are a file in mail.dat, and what it does is it kind of links together how your pallets are prepared, especially if you're doing co-palletization, co-mailing, co-mingling, and it basically allows you to link the original pallet for your single mailing to your combined mailing, and that file is required if you are doing commingling or co-palleting of any type, and so what's happening is the post office is finding that they're seeing some placards in the mail.dat file that they're not actually able to see when they're scanning the pallets when they come into the sites, and so it's like a 10% of their pallets they're just not seeing come in, and but then they're seeing the piece scans for what should have been on the pallet, so they know the mail's coming in, but the pallet placard isn't getting scanned. So there was a big discussion about how is this happening? Is this happening because somebody's changing the placard? Is it because someone's doing co-palletization but they're not actually representing that in their mail.dat file? So there's a lot of little things that are going to need to be worked out. There's talk about maybe putting together a work group to kind of talk through each of these issues, and there were some suggestions on how the post office could kind of try and get that information from the data that they already have. So stay tuned with that, but the lesson from this is if you're doing co-mail or if you're doing co-palletization, you do need to be using an OCI file, which means you probably need to have post pre-sort software, and you need to be representing that correctly in your electronic documentation. OCI is a requirement for those types of mailings, and so you will see that on your mailer scorecard, and if you're starting to see errors there, you need to start looking at that.
We at Satori have a post pre-sort solution, don't we?
Yeah, we do. We have the Monticello product, which will make that co-palletization process really seamless. It just takes all of those mail.dat files for all the mail that you want to co-pallet, and then you can just put them right together there, and then everything gets represented correctly in your eDoc. Yeah. So on to some good news. Let's talk about the promotions and incentives for 2015. So we've had these out for a little while here, but there are going to be 4 promotions for 2015. The big thing to note here is that each of those promotions is going to be for a much longer time frame. So in the previous years, you'd have 2, maybe 3 months to try and get that promotion. This year, we're actually seeing some promotions that are 6 months long, so that gives you a little bit more time to take advantage of those promotions. And so some interesting numbers that came out of the promotions and incentives recap, it looks like in 2014 that there was $1.8 billion in revenue and about almost 8 billion pieces that were associated with a promotion last year. And mailers were able to benefit from about 48 million in discounts. So that's a pretty big, big benefit to both the post office because they got to see that increase in mail volume, and to the mailers because we were able to experiment with some new technology and new mail formats, and we were able to get some good discounts from that. So you can kind of see the different promotions there. Earned value, that's that business reply mail piece that you can have your recipient send back to you. You get a good little rebate from that. There's the color trans promo promotion. So the nice thing with this is if you're a first class mailer and you print color on your mail piece there on the statement or bill itself, then you can get a 2% discount on your mail. The big change for that one for this year is the color does need to be on the bill or statement, not on the remittance form. So not on the piece that the person sends back to you. It needs to be the part that they keep. So, there's always the tear off piece where you fill out how much you're going to pay for your bill. The color needs to not be on that part. The next one is the emerging and advanced technologies. That one was extended to first class mail as well. So if you're using NFC or if you're using some fun augmented reality or anything like that, you can take advantage of this. They're actually expanding what can be used this year, and you can start using some more innovative ink things. So like if you are using like a conductive ink or a special dye that changes with the temperature. There are all these different things, different new technologies that are coming out in ink now that if you start using those on your mail pieces, and you have to also let the recipient know that, okay, this is a cool thing, use your NFC connection with your phone to activate it or whatever, then you can take advantage of that emerging technologies promotion. So
invisible ink for the address.
I don't think that would work.
Darn.
Yeah, but they do have some really fun innovations in the printing world, and being able to take advantage of those. You'll also be able to take advantage of the postage discount, so that's a win-win. So a couple other things that came out in the kind of the side discussions at MTAC. There is discussion in the informed visibility area, which is kind of the tracking and mail piece visibility area. They are talking about having a new barcode for facing slips for flat. So one of the gaps that they've had in the visibility into mail processing has been the flat bundles, and so they're talking about having a new barcode for the facing slips. So that's still kind of getting worked out, and we'll see what comes out of that. Obviously, they had the new Sunday delivery. They're also talking about grocery delivery in some certain areas. They'll be kind of expanding that out. So
I don't think I want to, with the problems they're having with the new 24-hour clock, I don't think I want my yogurt coming via USPS right now.
Well, it's actually it's kind of a different stream that they're having for the grocery delivery. They're actually having some special clerks go in, and they'll deliver the grocery only in certain areas, but they'll deliver it to your door between 3 o'clock and 7 o'clock in the morning, and so you'll have your fresh milk and cereal ready for you to go as soon as you wake up in the morning. And so those are kind of expanding a little bit. We'll see kind of how that grocery delivery initiative goes. The Sunday delivery has been very popular, so that'll be interesting. Right now there are about 7,500 zip codes that already have Sunday delivery, and they're talking about expanding significantly over the next few months.
Just months ago, weren't we talking about eliminating Saturday delivery?
And that's really interesting. That was brought up as well at MTAC, and actually what they're talking about now is they're just trying to make sure that for the volume that they have, that they're staffing appropriately and they're delivering appropriately. And so the talk of 5-day delivery really wasn't there at MTAC this year. So I do think they're a little more adventurous and forward thinking with their package delivery right now. That really is a big growth area. A couple other things: if you use stamps on rolls or anything like that, they are converting the entire stock from what do they call water activated gum, or WAG stamps, and those are the
which
ones,
is short for something you lick.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, you need some type of moisture to be able to get that to stick.
That's the best part about Christmas cards, I have to tell you.
Especially when it's the good gum, the ones that actually taste good. That's always a good thing. But yeah, so they're actually going to be phasing those out. Unfortunately, the water activated stamps are going to be phasing those out, and they're going to pressure sensitive adhesive, which are the ones that you just peel and stick.
What's next? Digital clocks, Velcro shoes, Kim? There goes my childhood.
I know it's but this is the new world, and so they're slowly starting to get everyone migrated over to these new stamps. So
I'm going to lick them anyway.
well, good luck with that. I don't know if it'll taste quite as good. But a couple other things to note, MTAC is celebrating their 50th anniversary at NPF this year. So in May, when we all go down to Anaheim for the big National Postal Forum, there's going to be some celebrations there because MTAC started about 50 years ago, and there's been a lot of really good progress, a lot of good collaboration between the industry and the post office, and we'll be celebrating that at NPF this year.
What to get for an MTAC that has everything?
Well, gold is, it's the 50th anniversary. It's the gold anniversary. So everything around that is going to be, pretty shiny, I think. Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah. So there's also some changes to certificate of mailing. Those are still getting kind of worked out. Those were announced as part of the price change. And so if you use the certificate of mailing, let us know, and we'll see if we can get you plugged into the people who are talking about those changes, because there's some interesting things happening there. And then also there's talk about moving over to self-adhesive tray labels. They've been having some problems with the tray barcodes, and
because they're bigger, they're really hard to lick.
Yeah, those ones are definitely, that would be a whole lot. You'd have to drink a lot of water. Yeah, and so but they're talking about, instead of having the insertable tray labels, to have something that's a little bit more self-adhesive. So that's all I had for today.
Excellent. Well, Kim, I appreciate that update from MTAC from February 2015.
That's right.
And your title these days is Senior Product Manager.
That's right. Yep.
Kim Mauch, Senior Product Manager for Satori Software. We do appreciate you stopping by the studio.
All right. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you stopping by this webinar. As I mentioned, in its entirety, this webinar will be available on satorisoftware.com. For Satori Software, I'm Rob Perrin, the Director of Multimedia Marketing. Once again, thank you for attending this webinar, and we at Satori would like to wish you smooth mailing ahead.